Welcome to the Expat Experience, your essential guide to relocating, living, and thriving in San Carlos, Mexico. Join seasoned real estate professional Robert DeForge as he pulls back the curtain on seamlessly transitioning from dreamer to doer. Whether you're eyeing retirement bliss, seeking the perfect work from anywhere setup, or hunting for your ideal vacation escape, this podcast is your compass to navigating the exciting journey to San Carlos, Mexico living. Get ready to turn your relocation dreams into sun-soaked reality.
Welcome to the Expat Experience podcast. Good to see you, Steve and Peggy. Thanks for coming along. I'm excited about today's podcast because being a lifelong boater myself, I want to hear about your adventures and how you wound up in San Carlos. So maybe you could start out, give us a little bit of your background, Steve, and tell us your experience about in boating and in the marine industry, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I started working on boats and then transitioned into being a manufacturer's rep, mainly because I wanted to do my avocation and my vocation. And that worked out pretty good because my expertise became in power boats and my recreation was sailboats. And so I did not ruin the sailing experience because I was, working it and playing at it all the time.
Right.
And then, I raised a kid and played a lot of golf growing up, living my life around where I lived. And then Peggy and I met, and I was a partner in a 34-foot sailboat with my brother. And that wasn't going to work out because Peggy wanted to do more boating than what a partnership would allow. So we bought a new boat and made plans to sail around the world. And initially to go to Mexico and then the South Pacific. And then we decided once we were in Mexico that going to the South Pacific wasn't going to work for us. And so Peggy found a house in a community called San Carlos, which is in the state of Sonora. And we found this because my insurance required me to be north of La Paz for the hurricane season.
Right.
And so we draw 10 feet of water and we needed to be in a marina because being hauled out, one, it was too hot and would cause damage to all the rubber products on the boat. And two is that we'd be too far off the ground in case of a tropical storm. And so we wanted to be in a marina year round. And so San Carlos satisfied that requirement. They had a deep enough marina for us to get into, and the San Carlos Marina is a very good hurricane hole. And The summer we bought the boat, we actually went through a fairly big tropical storm here, and the boat fared fine at the marina.
Yeah, I've heard about that storm. Did more damage to the land and certain houses. That was a pretty bad storm. So I'm familiar. I used to sail the Chesapeake quite a bit, and also the Southeast Hilton Head area, and then a little bit in Florida and Georgia. And in those areas, sailing is pretty tricky in terms of underwater obstructions, sandbars, and tidal shift daily. So I don't know if you've ever sailed in any areas where you had to contend with that. If you have, how does that compare to the Sea of Cortez?
Well, our home waters is, they call it the Salish Sea or the Pacific Northwest. We've cruised the boat extensively up there from Seattle all the way to Skagway, Alaska, and out to Sitka, around Vancouver Island. And it is actually fairly treacherous navigation. We have rocks. We have current flow that goes as high as probably 6-7 knots. You have to time the passage through rapids and narrow passages, because there's some of the places that'll push you backwards. Big whirlpools develop. And then
that's some technical sailing. That's very technical. Yeah.
Compared to down here, where the coastal cruising, you have to be pretty aware of staying far enough offshore to avoid any, of the reefs coming off the shore. But once you're doing a crossing, let's say from La Paz to Puerto Vallarta, it's pretty much standing watch. And while you're standing watch, you can be reading a book. Peggy would listen to music or podcasts. And about every 10 to 15 minutes, you look up and you take a look around and make sure there's no boats or anything like that coming around. And it's pretty relaxed. So after being down here for 4 years, when we went back to the Northwest with all the flotsam and all the trees and logs in the water, we were pretty nerve-wracked, having to pay attention 100% of the time.
I bet. So Steve mentioned podcasts, listening to podcasts on the boat. So you have Wi-Fi then on your boat?
No, that was before Starlink and before Wi-Fi was available on the boat. So what I would do is I would download a lot of different content, and then I would have it saved in my PC or in the memory in my phone. And one of the things I'd like to add, in addition to when we do the crossings and when you're in Mexico, one of the things that you did have to look for and be attentive of when you were doing the crossing from La Paz to Puerto Vallarta or La Cruz was dodging sea turtles. And that was a big issue, is dodging the sea turtles.
Never heard of that before. I know there's a lot of wildlife. And what did Jacques Cousteau say about the Sea of Cortez? He called it the world's aquarium. He said it was his favorite body of water. And of course, he was a person who did research all over the world. Now, how long is the passage from the Baja over to where we are here in San Carlos?
About 80 miles.
Yeah.
We're from La Paz.
Oh, from La Paz? Yeah. No, or from here over to
Santa
just to get to the other side, say to Concepcion or somewhere like that.
Yeah, it's probably 80, 90 miles.
Yes.
Okay.
We would leave in the middle of the night from here. And we did that so that we'd arrive over on the Baja with daylight so we could see where we were anchoring and get settled in before it settled down. It was an overnight sail, but it was, about a 10 to 11 hour sail.
Okay. Any safety concerns?
No, but we were pretty safety conscious. We have a life raft on the boat. We have an EPIRB, which is a satellite locating beacon, which is like dialing 911 and it's automatically activated. We had personal man overboard beacons that were activated when you inflated your life jacket, that would put out a tone signal over the VHF radio and then show up on the AIS on your chart plotter, on the location of that person. So we're pretty safety conscious, and we would wear harnesses at night and life jackets.
Mm-hmm.
Did you two ever have any fears of, let's call it, unwanted boardings?
No.
We
had one incident, and this is not a boarding. We were at an anchorage over on the Baja side, enjoying the day, and a Mexican fisherman came up and he wanted beer and he wanted gas. Well, we don't have any alcohol on the boat, so we didn't have any gas to give him. So I gave him a couple of bottles of water and sent him on his way. And that was the most extreme of anything. And, he thanked us and off he went to get beer from somebody else.
Another trade deal we did was we traded a couple gallons of water, because we had a water maker on board, for some rockfish that a couple of divers had gotten, but they didn't have any water. And so they gladly gave us 2 fish for 2 gallons of water.
Nice. I love it. One of my favorite things is to be out on a cruise and have the local fishermen come up and offer ceviche and things like that. I mean, you can't get any fresher than that. I asked the question about unwanted boardings because every now and then you'll see something pop up every few years about a person that disappeared, that kind of thing. And then stories are created around that, but I've never heard anything personally from anybody at the yacht club or otherwise of anything nefarious happening. I mean, when I lived in Florida, of course, a lot more people, but almost weekly there'd be something in the paper where somebody went out, maybe on their way to the Bahamas or making the crossing to go down to the Caribbean, and they disappeared, quote unquote.
Yeah, we haven't experienced anything, and we have not heard secondhand from somebody that has experienced the boarding in the Mexico area or heard of it, that it does go on. I had a personal friend, his son and daughter-in-law were boarded in Panama by Cowlitz, and they were pistol whipped, and everything was stolen off the boat, plus the dog. They survived it, and they got to Panama, and the community was awesome because it got their boat back into seaworthy condition so they could meet their scheduled transit of the Panama. But that was a pretty tragic. But that's up here in Mexico. I have not heard of anything. Now there's a lot of petty theft.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the places you've traveled, both on the Baja side and over here on your sailboat.
You know that's better than I do.
Well, our first stop in Mexico when we left San Diego was, of course, Ensenada. And that's a mandatory stop because you're checking into the country of Mexico. And we needed to I believe we spent 2 days there to get checked in with customs. And we had to get what's called a temporary import permit for our boat.
Right.
And we had to get a mandatory fishing license. And then from there, we cruised down around the Cape to San Jose del Cabo, and we stayed there approximately a week. We decided to forego Cabo San Lucas because at the time there was some exorbitant marina charges to stay in the marina just to tie up to the dock. And it was just large and not really what we needed. And then from there, we sailed up to La Paz, and along the way, Steve caught a beautiful tuna. And then we inadvertently spent approximately 2 months in La Paz because Steve had fallen down the companionway and dislocated his shoulder. Oh. Thank goodness we were in the marina and I was able to get help. And thank goodness La Paz has a very good hospital, and they took excellent care of Steve just within a few hours. And of course, it was a fraction of what medical care in the United States would have cost us. But during our stay in La Paz, that gave us an opportunity to get more grounded and associated with the community. I did some volunteering with the Catholic orphanage. And then from there, we had taken a few weekend trips to go up to Espiritu Islands, which is lovely. And once we felt confident that Steve was ready to sail and his shoulder had healed, we had sailed first to Mazatlan, correct?
Correct.
And we stayed approximately a week in Mazatlan. We sailed from Mazatlan to Isla Isabela. And that was interesting, but for us, it was not really as exciting as what some other cruisers have told us. It's not a very good anchorage. But when we left Isla Isabela, we went to La Cruz, which is just north of Puerto Vallarta, worked our way to Puerto Vallarta. And then we did another overnight passage down to Tenacatita Bay, which is just a bay, but it's reasonably protected. And that's a nice sailing community with several cruisers, and they have a regimen, and you can talk about all the activities there.
Yeah, there's actually a mayor for the cruising community, and they start out in the morning with if you want to participate, you swim ashore. Mm-hmm. And there's a little river that's a river cruise if you want to take it in your dinghy, and it's an easier way to get onto the beach. There's a slight surf break on the beach, and a lot of the cruisers, they'll swim ashore. And then once they're ashore, whoever wants to play bocce ball And they'll get 10 guys or guys and gals that'll play bocce ball for a couple hours. And whoever doesn't play bocce ball, then they go for walks or paddle around on their paddle boards. And after that's all over, there's a little restaurant and that serves beer and, Mexican food, tacos and shrimp and, food like that. And so they sit there, for another couple hours drinking and eating. And then everybody goes back to their boat and takes their siesta. So it's quite the lifestyle.
That's a rough life, Steve, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then once a week, instead of rafting the boats up, they have a dinghy raft up. And then the mayor picks a topic and it goes around and people introduce themselves and talk on his topic for a little while.
Ah, sounds like fun.
Then when we were done at Tenecatita, then we would sail down to Barra Navidad. And because of the draft of our boat, we would have to stay in the marina adjacent to the resort, which is lovely. A lot of boats anchor in what they call the lagoon, but it wasn't nearly deep enough. We draw 10 feet. And so we couldn't get into the lagoon with our boat. But it was nice because you could do some shopping. If you needed to go to a larger community, you could go to Manzanillo. Barra Navidad was perfect for, just regular tienda shopping for produce. And they had some lovely restaurants there, some good music. And, other cruiser routes would go further south. We chose not to. And then we would go back up to Tenecatita, go through the regimen of hanging out at the beach, playing bocce ball, going to the bar and taking siestas for another week or however long was necessary before the weather cleared, right? And then we would start heading back north.
Yeah, during the wintertime, the prevailing winds are north winds. Mm-hmm. So going south is always easy to do because it's a downwind sail. But getting back north during those prevailing north winds is a pretty tough sail. And so most people wait until late in the spring to head back north once the southerly flow settles back in.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. So you own a home in San Carlos.
Yes.
What can you describe that experience? What made you decide to purchase a home and how that's worked out for you?
Well, so after the first year, we had a car down here because we always came back to San Carlos to moor our boat for the summertime.
Uh-huh.
And we found that it was cheaper to take your clothes to the launderia and more convenient than using the laundromat that was at the marina. And so there was a laundromat up here. And when we leave the laundromat, we drive by an area that's called Creston, and there was a house for sale there. And Peggy's always been interested in real estate, and I'm always interested in what is waterfront costs in different parts of the country or on the West Coast. And so there was a sign on this house for sale. And so Peggy took a picture of it and called and left a message, and nobody called her back. And so a year goes by, and the second year we were down here, the house is still for sale. And so Peggy said, well, I'll try again and see if somebody calls me back. And nobody calls her back. The third year, and at this point, we have decided that we are not going to sail to the South Pacific. And so we've been talking about, well, what do we do during the summer or the winter when we're not on our boat? And we had decided that we were going to ship our boat back or get our boat back to the Northwest because it's got some of the best, I consider some of the best cruising, at least in the top 5 in the world, because it's great.
It's true.
And so Peggy's dropping the laundry off. I'm not with her. And there's a lady in the driveway of this house that's now been for sale for 3 years that we know of. And she stops and she asks the lady, says, is this house really for sale? And the lady looks at her and goes, well, what do you mean? And says, well, I've called for the last 3 years and nobody's called me back. And so she talks Peggy to come in and look at the house and meet the owner. And she goes through the house and she falls in love with the location of the house and the house. And it's a
the pool.
And the pool. And it's a hacienda style home. And so she comes back and says, oh, you got to see this house. Well, I'm more focused on putting the boat away because we got to take all the sails off, all the running rigging, cover all the plastic and the chrome and stainless with foil. And then we got to get the trailer recommissioned to drive north and all those things. And so I'm more concerned about that. So the night before we leave, Peggy says, we got to go see it today, this afternoon. And so we go and we walk through it. And again, my head's someplace else. I'm seeing the location's beautiful. And I'm going, yeah, okay, yeah. And then, but I want to get back, get the trailer hooked up so we can leave tomorrow morning. And so we drive north and we're talking about it. And Peggy, oh, this is a great house and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, let's go up to Payson, Arizona. That's, have you ever been there? And she had not. And I said, it's got big ponderosa pines. I love to play golf. I lived in a golf course community before we went cruising. And we get up there and we're looking at the homes, which are very affordable. The golf's affordable. And we're talking and the salesman says, yeah, and it only snows up here twice a year up to about 6 inches. Peggy turns around, goes and gets in the car and waits for me to get that done talking to, because Peggy does not like snow or cold. And so then I had Peggy research finding a real estate agent, and I'll let you kind of take it from there on.
Well, I just want to interject because one thing Steve didn't mention was after our first season of sailing in Mexico, when we stored the boat in the marina, I had this idea. I approached Steve. We were still on the boat. And I said, Steve, I think that we need to consider getting a travel trailer because when we were off the boat, we were homeless. When we went back to the Northwest and we left the boat in Mexico, our home was the boat. So when we were going to go back to the Northwest for the summer, we didn't really have a plan of where we were going to stay. Initially, we stayed with some friends, but we didn't want to wear out our welcome. So Steve thought, well, okay, maybe I can find a travel trailer, a used one for $3,500. So when we were up in the States in the spring, when we returned, Steve saw what $3,500 would get you. So we ended up buying a new trailer, and we still have it. And it's been a great decision. It was a great purchase. So when Steve talks about the trailer and getting ready to go, after the first season down here, we had the travel trailer. So that was our home when we weren't on the boat. But so there's the logistics of the boat, the trailer, and now the house. But I found a realtor in town, and she was amazing and helped us immensely. And there are some details of buying a home in Mexico when you're, I believe it's 50 miles away, approximately within 50 miles of the shore. And that's foreigners have to have a trust.
Right.
And fortunately, we understood that before we started this purchase. And there were some complications with this specific property, but they eventually did get worked out. It took a few years, but so I don't know if you want to edit that in about the trailer and, all that. And it really benefited us because we didn't have a home, but also when we would commute back and forth, you're always bringing stuff back from the States.
Yeah, furniture and whatnot, things that you can't get or that you're used to from living in the States. You might have more difficulty. And because we live here in San Carlos and we're only 4 hours to the border,
exactly
6 to Tucson, it's pretty nice to be able to run up there with the cargo trailer and grab some furniture or whatnot, bring it back. That works out well.
Coincidentally, you brought up the cargo trailer. And let's see, we bought our house in 2018 and we rented it out for a few years in the summer season, which was very successful. But once we decided to bring our personal belongings and our furniture, we decided not to rent it. And then I don't know if you want to talk about the trailer and our most expensive furniture.
Yeah. So if anybody's contemplating, going sailing or taking on the RV life, and you have this collection of things that you collect over your life, even though you try to weed out as much as you can, you got to store it. And so we chose, based on the recommendations from a friend of ours that had done this prior to us, of buying a shipping container. And so we bought a 20-foot shipping container that we owned, and we put the furniture that we couldn't sell, which was a big oversized leather couch and some heirloom furniture that Peggy had, and, pictures, and then textbooks and books and all those kind of things. And we packaged it up into this container, and then we didn't look at it for probably 3 years. Mm-hmm. So this furniture that's in there, and so you got to store the container someplace, and the company we bought the container from will store it for you for $100 a month. And so each month you're paying $100 for this container. And we did that for about 7 years. And so you've got 7 years of rent on your furniture, and then you got to transport it down there. And I looked into shipping the container down here. And even though we're on the water, the closest container port is in Ensenada. And then they put it on a truck and they truck it from Ensenada down to here. And it was a fairly expensive ordeal. So I decided that I would buy a cargo trailer. And so we ended up with a 24-foot car hauler. And we loaded so we bought that, and then we went down to the trailer. And when we opened the trailer, we were very pleasantly surprised, because after 5 or 6 years, 7 years,
so you had to open the trailer to get your clubs.
Yeah. But there was no mold. There was no bugs. There was no dust. It was as clean as the day we put it in there.
That's a miracle. That's a miracle.
Yeah, that was that. So I highly recommend that as a way of storing your belongings long term. And then so we put it in, and I had a Tahoe that I was towing it with. And a little side note is that we got I weighed it, and we were at about 6,300 pounds. The Tahoe's limit is 6,500 pounds. And we got up to Anacortes, and we continued to put things in it to take to Mexico. And so the Tahoe, and I go to position the Tahoe to hook it up, and it wouldn't back up to the trailer. And so I pull out, I drive around, put it in reverse, it goes in reverse, and then I line up to back up to the trailer again, put it in reverse, and it would not back up to the trailer. And I go into the RV, and I tell Peggy, I says, the transmission's going out on the Tahoe. And this is the day before we're going to leave. And we're going, what are we going to do? And so I called the garage, said I knew the guys, and they said, well, if you bring it down, we'll put it on the scope. We'll look at it. And we did that. No error codes, no nothing. There's nothing wrong with the transmission. The whole time we're driving down, there's no problem with the transmission. Every time I park, I back up into the parking spot in case I have to, coast out, so I can pull out straight. But I've lost confidence in the Tahoe and the transmission. And talking to the garage, he's saying, Steve, you know better. You need a 3/4 ton for that size rig. And so we ended up buying a 3/4 ton pickup and ended up shipping the Tahoe down. And I've yet today had any issues with that transmission. The Tahoe just did not want to haul the cargo trailer all the way to Mexico. So we bought, to get our furniture down here, and why it's the most expensive furniture in Mexico, is that we bought a pickup truck, a cargo trailer, plus we stored it for probably 7 years.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Tracy will watch this podcast or not, but when we met, very similar story. She had gone from a large house to a much smaller house and had essentially a container full of enough furniture to fill this large house that she came from. And we wound up having it shipped to our warehouse for our business and opening it up. And we ended up having an auction to sell off all these things that didn't really fit our lifestyle. So,
and
then when we came here, I said I had a trailer, and I made a deal with her. I said, I'm not paying storage any longer. So whatever fits in the SUV and in the trailer, that's our life that we start over in Mexico. Now, since then, I've had to go back and purchase some items, but coming down, people said, what about the cost of, import, customs when you come across the border? And I said, yeah, it was pretty rough. I think it was $21.70 that they charged me for all the belongings in the world that I have. So anyway, but so you're down here and you've been here for a while now. You spend 4 or 5 months a year here in San Carlos, roughly?
Typically it's 6 months a year, but every year it varies depending on what our commitments are and our summer sailing schedule is in the Northwest.
Now, you've seen some changes. Are you still as enamored of San Carlos as you were when you first got here?
Oh, yes, first.
Yes and no. I mean, there's definitely the cost of things has increased significantly since we purchased our home and since we were here, because we used to be here in San Carlos before we bought the house, and we would stay at the local campground while we were getting the boat prepared to go sailing or while we were preparing the boat for summer storage. So obviously, like everybody, we've seen a significant increase in the cost of everything. We enjoy the close-knit community, and we've made some very good friends. We can't beat the weather. That's for sure. And with the location of our house, we're reminded when we go to other people's homes, and if they're facing more of what would that be, the north and northwest, in the winter, it's quite a bit more chilly for them because of the northerly winds, whereas we face the east southeast, and so we're very protected. So that's a nice feature. There are several restaurants here in San Carlos, a lot of options to choose from, and they all have varying degrees of food menu options and service and quality. It's a big benefit to be able to get in the vehicle and, like you mentioned before, within 4 to 5 hours, be back up into the United States for whether it's an emergency or
to buy an appliance or U.S. appliance.
To buy things because there are certain things that you either shouldn't buy here in Mexico or that just aren't available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's where it really benefits to have somebody that knows the ropes here and can kind of guide you and say, you don't want that. This is the direction to go. And I'm actually headed out in the morning. I'm going to go up and do a quick turnaround just to grab some items in my box and then come back. I do that quite a bit. I'll just go up, and sometimes I'll even go up and come back in the same day, but that makes quite a long day.
Yeah.
So you have a beautiful home. I've been there. I'm going to include some shots of your view that you have there when we put this out, but it's a gorgeous place, and I know you enjoy it tremendously. And you're headed north, next week or a week after?
Tuesday.
That's
coming
quick.
Tuesday.
Okay. So give us your sales pitch for San Carlos. Go ahead, Peggy.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. For those that want to live in Mexico and in San Carlos, it's certainly more affordable than the States. And again, because of the relative ease of access to commute back up to the border, you do have that freedom and flexibility. Whereas if you're further south or on the Baja, you may not have that option. It may be multiple days, or you may be forced to fly. And that can be a challenge. And obviously you can't fly an appliance or a piece of furniture back. I like the small, tight community, the small town community that we have. We've made a lot of friends, both foreigners, gringos, Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans. And everybody has been wonderful and very welcoming and supportive. And, I get sad when the end of the season comes and it's time to pack up and head back north. But then again, we have a wonderful lifestyle on the boat, and that's every much as enjoyable.
Yeah, and I get sad when I see everybody leave. My gringo friends leave, but then you guys, if you've been here through a summer, it's kind of nice. It's hot, but it's quiet and very laid back. Because a lot of the population has left. Now we get the Mexicans on the weekends, for vacation, stuff like that, but primarily it's really kind of nice for a while. We get a break from the hustle bustle, So anything else you guys want to add to kind of let people know about the area?
Well, we came to San Carlos for kind of the amenities. First it was the Deepwater Marina. And then when we bought the house, it was because of the affordability of waterfront property. And I couldn't afford waterfront property anyplace else in North America, Canada, or the United States. But the people are amazing. I've met some unique individuals that have, history, have accomplished a lot in their lives, and that are people that would give you the shirt off their back if you needed it, and are very giving people. And so the people is what's kept me here. And a good example of that is that there's probably 4 individuals that San Carlos pickleball community was going to lose the use of their course that they had. And so they banded together and decided to build their own courts that they would own and not be dependent on leasing them or renting them from somebody else. And there was probably 4 people that individually contributed probably close to $1 million to accomplish that goal. Yeah. And not too many people really realized that that's how it was done. And, there was a lot of other people involved, but there was probably 4 people that contributed the 75 to 80% of the funds that were used to accomplish it. And so it's a great addition. It's probably the second biggest magnet for people coming to San Carlos right now, because our golf course is basically a gravel pit. And
for now,
behind the marina and the water, it's probably the second leading activity in San Carlos.
Yeah, there are people.
Is it still considered the largest pickleball court in all of Latin America?
Yeah.
It is.
It has 14 courts, correct?
Yep.
They're adding to it as well. So it's growing. I meet people all the time that come here that are from all over the world, and they come here just to play pickleball on those courts. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's an outstanding course. I've taken beginner classes there and played some pickleball, not nearly to the extent that Steve does. And it's a wonderful addition to the community. Another thing aside from pickleball that I really like are just the attraction, like is it called the Miramar, the lookout?
Mirador. The Mirador.
Mirador out by Marina Real. It's a beautiful place. It doesn't cost anything. There's some stands if you want refreshments, and you can just sit and enjoy the view. You can go out and watch the sunset. If you're lucky, you'll see a pod of whales. It's just a magnificent view. I believe that National Geographic referred to it as one of the best views in the world.
Yes.
I don't know the ranking or whatnot. Guaymas is close by. They have the spectacular Pearl Farm, and they'll give you a tour of the Pearl Farm, and that's very interesting and very fascinating. Some of the locals, of course, know that the sea turtles migrate and come to shore to lay their eggs in the summer and in the fall. And there's a wonderful community that supports the sea turtles and preserving the eggs so they hatch safely and can swim back out into the sea. There's other marine conservation. Another thing that I really like about San Carlos is that they manage the animal population with the dogs and the cats. In comparison to other Mexican communities that we visited when we were on our boat, the other communities did not manage the dog and cat population nearly as well as San Carlos does. And I think that's wonderful. There's never a shortage of things to do in San Carlos if you want to be involved, if you want to volunteer. We have Rescate, which is an ambulance and a small-scale urgent care facility. And that's unique, especially when you compare that to other small communities of Mexico.
We now have a hospital.
And we have a hospital here in San Carlos. I think it's called San Jose Hospital. So
it's a fantastic hospital. I don't know if you guys have done the tour, but it's state of the art. And Tracy hurt her arm, and she's had a wonderful experience dealing with the medical care here. It's been phenomenal, world class, and much quicker than it would have been in the States in terms of trying to see a specialist and that kind of thing. So that's been wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing parts of your story. And it's good to see you, and we'll see you really soon.
Okay,
thank you.
We appreciate you joining us. Visit expatexperiencepodcast.com for more practical tips and insights on making your move to paradise. We're here to help navigate the process of relocating to San Carlos every step of the way. Start your journey toward living the dream in Mexico.